the line that has been kind of through my entire life has been, if you're not creating value, you don't have value.
You are loved by God. Mr. Graham Sharkey, you are finally in our studio, and we're finally together.
Can you believe it?
No,
No.
we've been talking for months.
Yep.
And through Zoom. So it's like I do know you, but I've actually never like physically kind of like been in your space.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Is it crazy? Does it feel weird?
It does feel a little bit, it feels good weird though.
I know.
Really good.
All right. So Graham, like you are so much. I don't even know how to introduce you, like, but maybe it's best that you introduce yourself.
No, there's a couple things that I'm really excited about. I'm excited about just this series that we're doing, the Summer of Strength series. This is how we met. We kind of started talking about how we could potentially partner with Momentum and See Hear Love, and super grateful to be here and to be a part of this. And I think that for me, my journey has started out as like wanting to be a soccer player.
Was Pele your favorite?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to be Pele. I played soccer when I was young. And I just found out that the Canadian women's team in the Olympics just won gold in soccer.
It's huge.
Way to go, us.
It's crazy.
It's like, way to go.
We helped with all of that. Absolutely. Yeah. So from there to wanting to be a musician, from being a musician to want to be a producer managing business, and then into like marketing, venture capital stuff. And then now I have no idea what I am. How's that sound? So that would be the work, and that is part of this whole issue, is like the idea of trying to separate what I do from who I am. So that's like, that has been like the bane of my existence from, the moment that I could understand the difference between the two and not knowing what that was.
So you are, like you mentioned, Momentum. That's a lot. There's so much I want to unpack with you through this, because you said so much there. So you are co-founder of Momentum Entertainment?
Yep. My partner is Trevor McNeven, and he's a lead singer from Thousand Foot Crutch. Just like that, he is not one sum of those parts. He's multiple kind of things as a father and a husband and a businessman. And so it had been a couple of years ago that we started Momentum, and probably throughout this we'll find out more about what that is. But it's been exciting.
Well, I'm so grateful for our partnership. It's like one of those things where, you're like, oh, COVID sucks and there's nothing good. And, and then we all meet, and it's just, I think for See Hear Love, if I can say this so honestly, it's just like, it kind of like gave us a little spark. Like, there's great people to partner with and opportunities out there and great organizations to partner with. So I know we're going to talk about that later. I love that we're in partnership and go ahead.
And Momentum's kind of key core of what we are is literally to create movement by inspiring hope, courage, and freedom. And so if there's like a spark that comes through that, that's like why we actually exist.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so that fits perfectly with See Hear Love and our ethos and mission and vision. So it's perfect. But what's really cool is a lot of people don't know, when I'm like starting this SOS podcast series, embarrassing myself singing like Sting song, like sending out an SOS, which I was going to do, and I'm totally like terrified because you are a musician, not doing it.
If you heard me sing though, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I think it's time for me to pick up that mic.
Or maybe become a soccer player.
That's exactly it.
But you actually and Trevor came up with SOS, Summer of Strength. Because remember, we were like, okay, we want to do a podcast series for See Hear Love. Let's do it this summer. Why was that the thing? Because I was thinking you were going to be like something completely different. But you two came up with that and came to me and said, oh yeah, we have to do SOS, Summer of Strength.
And to be fair, that was Trevor who came up with the actual like final kind of tagline of Summer of Strength. We talk regularly through my personal recovery and my journey and stuff like that about what it takes to be resilient and be to have like the capacity and the emotional, mental, and physical strength to kind of get through sometimes minute by minute versus day by day, by month. And he just was like, he's so good with taking complicated kind of scenarios and creating like simple kind of like solutions and taglines. And so he brought this up to me, and I was just like, man, it's annoying actually. It's annoying at how good he is at what he does. So it was pretty funny. But I was just like, boom, Like, we don't even need to think about it more. And then I messaged you because I'm the messenger. So
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I could have taken all the credit, and I kind of wanted to, but we went back and forth on it, and then I sent it to you, and I'm like, then it's like kind of fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Hopefully you love it as well, and it
Totally.
resonates with you. And it seemed to resonate with a ton of people.
So many people, because like the last conversations, I mean, we've gone through, like Graham, like strengthening in areas of marriage and relationships when, you know, there's infidelity involved, or strengthening your singleness. We've done strengthening in areas of mental health and anxiety and depression with Lecrae, strengthening your resolve when, hey, let's leave a $35 million contract to go become a farmer. Like strengthening, you know, your resolve, or strengthening you going, really, God, that's what you're calling me to do. Like, it's just been over and over, like strengthening like the Sealies in loving yourself, God, and others. Like, and so it worked so perfectly. And I think I said this before, you know, we were talking now, was that when I was sharing with people that I was interviewing, hey, you're part of this series called Strengthening. It was like something resonated so deeply. Maybe it's after and through COVID, people were like, I want to be a part of like strengthening listeners and viewers in these areas.
Yeah.
So it was really perfect.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you, Trevor.
And out of the pandemic and in
Yeah.
a pandemic, like, how do we navigate this in a way that is really, you know, the best versions of ourselves?
Yeah.
You know, it's been such a journey, and everyone can admit, I think, that there's been some pretty lows, big lows, and some
Yeah.
pretty weird highs. And, you know, out of it, how do we stay strong and keep focused?
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that's, you know, again, so mission and vision of See Hear Love is that what I found over the past 5 years is so many people are coming to us saying, help us. Like, how do I change my behavior, thinking? And then with the foundation of Jesus. Because you can't do it on your own. You're going to need community. You're going to need Jesus. But you're also, and the biggest thing that I found too is over the years, I've had to really say to people, but now you have to do something.
Right.
Like, you can't just go, Jesus, and my community is going to drag me across the finish line. It's like I've had to say, no, you got to stop doing that. Or you've got to start doing this. And you actually have got to do something.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a whole other discussion, because sometimes I think within sometimes church culture, we've just been like, okay, it's just going to happen.
Totally.
And it's really dangerous because, you know, you have to actually choose and do as well as like trusting God and listening to him and having community around you. There is an action. So that's why I think the strengthening was like, we're going to strengthen you and give you tips and tools, but now you have to go and make those changes.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So this is neat though. So we've got this partnership, but there's another partnership and connection that you personally have, Graham, with See Hear Love, and in that, because we're part of Crossroads, we are a production of Crossroads Christian Communications, which is where you're at. You're actually in our like
which is
building.
beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So tell us about that, because I think that's so amazing that way back there's now a connection point to us.
Yeah, I think I was telling you kind of when I was walking through the halls, and you know, there's pictures of people and stuff here, and it just reminded me, I would have been 5 years old, and I was like that little kid who was like tossing rocks at the neighbor who's building the fence and swearing at them.
You're one of those?
Yeah. Just the epitome of a little boy. Or not even just a boy, just a little disturber. How's that sound?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And was kind of tossing rocks at the neighbor. The neighbor's kind of freaking out, and I'm yelling at him, and I'm swearing at him, and my mother, you know, of course, calls me in and has this like full-blown discussion with me, saying, "Hey, like, do you want to be like this?" And I was just like, I don't actually. Like, I'm crying. She's disciplined me. She said, like, you don't actually have to be this way. And that whole conversation happened because for the first year of from 4 to 5, my mom was watching 100 Huntley Street in David Main's, and I'm not sure exactly what happened in that, but my mom basically told me that she like flew through the TV basically to try and accept God into her heart.
Wow.
And the next step after that, they were like, you know, and you can also know the Holy Spirit, who Jesus has left for us to kind of, and in the same thing was filled with the Spirit. And so my mom's having this conversation with me as a 5-year-old saying, you know, do you want the help of somebody to help you be a good person and be a better person, and somebody, you don't have to do this on your own. And I initially was just like, well, does dad know him? Like,
Because
that's,
you're thinking it's like a
yeah,
person, and
that's
you're
the
like, what?
conversation. Like, has dad done this?
Yeah.
And she said to me, and I remember this. I was on our back deck. It was like in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, and my mother just says, he hasn't yet. She didn't lie. She said he hasn't yet, but he will.
Hmm.
And so it was super crazy. And so I accept Jesus in my life, and through some other experiences ended up accepting the Holy Spirit. And then about 6 months later, David Maines had come to Lloydminster, and my dad is like, he's actually like a legit hero of mine, and I could get emotional about it just because of the way he is in every situation. He is the calm, he is the collected, he is like very he'll process things, but he doesn't get super emotional about something. He won't react. He'll just listen, take it all in, and then talk to God and figure out what the best way forward is. And I tell everybody that's super kind of weird to want to be exactly like, your dad, but it's like he's laid out this kind of like roadmap of what it means to be an incredible human of integrity and character. But before then, he would suggest that he had a bit of a drinking problem, but he was always just a really good man. But for whatever reason, David Maines came to Lloyd, and my dad was sitting at the very far back, and he asked, and my mom didn't push him or anything like that, just was praying for him, and asked asked him to asked if anybody wanted to receive Jesus. They could put their hand up or they could do whatever. My mom says, and my dad, confirms that he didn't go to the aisle. He went over the chairs. This like man who doesn't really get super excited about anything.
Yeah.
He knew that this is something that he needed in his life. And so now this kind of like full circle moment of us sitting here in the space that is like, has this incredible history, an incredible platform and foundation. It's just so cool to be able to partner with, 20 years later.
It's amazing,
or
eh?
40 years later.
And David Maines was the founder of Crossroads Christian Communications and Yes TV, which is where like See Hear Love airs. And I always think about legacy. I always think about that decisions matter. I also think like with David, he was like mid-20s when he was like an entrepreneur and started this incredible ministry. And you never, I think you have to think like, wow, like, for us as entrepreneurs and other people that are, what you start, the impact for generations to come and what you do, like it matters. And sometimes it's scary. Like it wouldn't have been easy for him to start a Christian like content like media company and broadcast station. And I think it's the same thing too. And I started to See Hear Love. It's terrifying. You don't have all what you think you need or even the skills. But then God's like, cool. Then it's me.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm going to help you. And it wasn't like some crazy, like, spiritual. I mean, it was a spiritual thing. But, when I say God helped me, he brought a lot of people to help me. And he downloaded some crazy creative ideas. And then just some, like, supernatural strength, like, just to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. I love that the connection with us
Yeah.
actually goes to somebody who doesn't even know you
Yep.
in that way,
Sure.
right? And here we are.
Yep.
It's kind of neat. It's kind of like,
Yep. It's like God's got a plan.
God does have a plan.
Yeah.
So you make this decision at 5
Mm-hmm.
to follow Jesus. And some people are like, did you really know what you're doing? But, did you know and or not? And what impact did that have? Like when you said, okay, yes to Jesus, now you're kid and then teenage years. I think it's just what I want to do is just pull out your story, Graham, because you are a storyteller and just want to hear a little bit of your journey, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you talk about shame and you talk about embarrassment and you talk about some of these things. I even talk about having like somebody in my life that I can look up to and create a path afterwards. And how did I get so sideways halfway through it? And to be honest, it was legitimately, like, I'm 43 right now. It would have been 20 years of my life of kind of like floundering even though a lot of that was in the church, leading worship in churches, music directing in churches, it's like I had these multiple kind of like facades happening. And so the idea of like, at 5, I've had a couple really intense experiences that I can't educate people to. It's like they're just my experiences. I can't even explain them. But at that same time that I asked Jesus in my heart, my mom was like, "Do you want this helper to come alongside?" And she put her hand on my head, and I was like, "Well, sure. If you've done it, I'll do it." And I fell over. My head hit the wall. A little bit of gyprock pulled out, and I was like freaked out, to be honest. And whether that's theological, I'm just telling you my story.
Yeah.
And I was so freaked out because my head didn't hurt. It was like, it wasn't that I was like, I had kind of lost control and kind of like fell down. And my mom is running around the coffee table praising God about this thing, and then realizing that I'm like on the floor kind of scared.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, do you hear and feel words? And I did. And I was just like, and then I just looked at her, I said, I don't want this right now. You know what I mean? And like I said, I can't really, I can only speak of my experiences for how I experienced them. And so there was like a very real moment at that time where I was just like, whatever this is very real.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of moved on and kind of did life. And from there, I just kind of, I gave my life to the church. I played guitar on Wednesday nights, and Thursday nights I would go out to a reserve and would be with our pastor as he spoke to different groups of people. And then we went to, on Sunday mornings, I'd do Sunday morning, and Sunday night I'd play Sunday night. And I was in grade 6 doing like 4 services a week.
Wow.
Playing guitar in church. And so I was like embedded into this kind of like culture and this kind of thing very early on. And in that, and I'll talk through lots of things, today, but there's never any blame. You know what I mean? It's like I'm 43-year-old person making decisions right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that. I don't blame anyone else. But at that time, I had to wear a tie. It didn't matter how I felt. It's like you put on this face so that everybody thinks that you're happy. If you're, grew up in a bit of a faith movement. And so it's like, if you weren't healed, you were probably living out of God's will.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There was just a lot of stuff that was kind of ingrained in me at that young age. And that led to me being able to be phenomenal at putting on multiple faces, where it's just like I can, if you need me to be this way, I can be that way. If you need me to be that way, it can be that way.
So you're like a chameleon.
Absolutely.
It's interesting you say that because there's so many people, even myself, that did that. Like, I had to wear dresses, nylons.
Sure.
Ew. And I'm like in the Philippines and it's hot and you have to wear nylons and you have to wear dresses and you had to go to church all the time.
Yep.
And then it just got to be routine and nothing about relationship. It became what was expected of me. And I know a ton of people that have been in that space.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, I'm glad you're being honest about that because I started becoming like Melinda at church and grade and teaching youth, like, Sunday school and singing, and then partying and not being into it at all, like on the weekends.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that because I think for a lot of listeners that might be something that really resonates because a lot of us go through the motions, and yet it's not real. It's like what you're saying, right?
Well, and I can kind of reverse engineer kind of like my space now where everything is to do with radical honesty, authentic living, kind of vulnerable transparency, and then just open-handedness, and those are like my core kind of things that every day that I get up and I just do a little self-check-in in the morning, and then again, in the afternoon, and then one more time at night, you know what I mean? Just be like, did I live the best version of myself today? And if any one of these things aren't there, then I know that I'm living out of my addiction, not living out of my recovery. Yeah. And so there's so many layers to that, you know what I mean? But my personal thing is that I just always wanted to avoid, conflict or painful scenarios,
Mm.
whether it's because of some PTSD from, some incidences in the past or whatever that is. I've learned how to really create a beautiful defense mechanism around me that nobody can get in.
Yeah.
And in that, though, then you're not authentic and you're not real and you're not true. And that led me down to a 10-year stretch of numbing through substance abuse and through relationships and anything I could do to kind of not have to think about the pain that I was really in or the emptiness that I was really feeling.
So when you're at church, and I want to go back and then go forward.
Sure.
So you're at church, you're feeling like a chameleon. Why was that? Like, I mean, I think I'm trying to understand because that was how I felt. Was it we weren't connected really truly to like the whole experience of Jesus? Was it, and again, it's not bashing the church, but like the systems and the expectation or
It,
judgment? Like, what was it? Because I think there are a lot of people that have left the church because of this.
yeah, and I think for me, unfortunately, it was probably the opposite. Like I had lots of like I fit in the church and I fit in this, but when it came to at school and when it came to like whether it be music or whether playing soccer and like it was very. It's so funny when you think about it now, but it's very uncool to be to go to church on a Sunday. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
very uncool. Like I started drinking. I think I had my first drink when I was 12 years old. You know what I mean? Small town.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of on the weekend and everybody managed it to get to the place where your parents think I'm over here, their parents over there.
Oh,
And you know
totally.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I loved that lifestyle and I loved how I felt in that space.
Hmm.
And when I was at church, I loved being the young kid on stage that everybody, you know what I mean, looked to and just like you're doing such a good job. That external kind of, validation is something that I've always, 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 I put it above everything, right? So versus the intrinsic versus like, what does God think of me? The line that has thread that has been kind of through my entire life has been if you're not creating value, you don't have value.
Wow.
And so that has been and so you'll see me work really hard and you'll see me all these things. And sometimes if I have these things like the radical honesty, the authentic living, like in those things in the right place, then I'm doing it for the right motivation.
Mm-hmm.
But when I need you to love me and I want you to like me and I want you to think that I'm great and I want you to think that there's that I am this something, you know what I mean? Then all of a sudden all the work that I'm doing ends up being out of the wrong motivation. So you can see me doing the exact same thing. And if I'm living out of my addiction, I'm living out of like, I need you to love me. And if I'm living out of my recovery, it's because I know at my core, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's
Wow.
like, I'm not going to say it's not exhausting in the sense of sometimes it really is, but it's like you really do become like the closest 5 people in your life. And it's like surrounding myself with proper partners and friends and people has really, really, really given me like this ability to kind of to jump out on some of these things we're doing with momentum and some of these other things that are external and not need to have that validation from people, and just
Mm-hmm.
to do it because I know it's the right thing to do.
Wow. External validation. I would say that so many of us
Yeah.
live in that space because, you know, there's a part of like who doesn't want to be adored and
Mm-hmm.
validated and
Mm-hmm.
affirmed
Mm-hmm.
because then we know that we're doing a good job or we're in the right space or like we're amazing
Mm-hmm.
because everybody wants that. But I think it's, yeah. And, even as I sit here, I'm like, even though I'm at this, like I'm the host and executive producer of a women's Christian talk show, there still is that space. I'm still like battling to say, what's my true motivation? Like when I don't get the likes I get on Instagram
Sure.
or I get as many views and things that I do, do I suck? Like, am I not relevant anymore? Am I completely obsolete because as I get old, you know what I'm saying? Like all these things. And then it's scary because you could easily go there and like direct your life to ensure that that happens, or am I my authentic
Mm-hmm.
self and like my value comes from from God,
Mm-hmm.
and I may not have to do anything. Well, actually, I don't have to do anything for Him to still love me. I think that's a big thing. I think, and we've talked about this before, Graham, this whole idea of we're in a society and culture where productivity equals value.
Yeah.
The more you produce, the more valuable you are to society. And if you don't produce, then you're actually not as valuable.
Yeah.
You're not contributing to our consumeristic,
Sure.
society. And I think that's driven me too. I think it drives a lot of people.
And it's great when we're like killing it.
Sure,
You know
for
what I mean?
sure.
This is like then all the dopamine
Yeah,
hits and
go,
you're
go,
just
go. You're
like
on
all
fire.
of the chemicals are firing and
Right,
you're getting
right.
like it's amazing. But as soon as something happens that potentially you can't control, or you're not able to do the thing that everybody wants us to do, or you fall down, or you fail, or all this, all of a sudden, like that would drop me into like a deep, deep depression. And it's just like, well, I clearly am useless. I'm clearly not the person that I've lied to myself. I've lied to you. All of these things, and my value system would just be completely eroded, and self-esteem. And it's so funny, like I think the most powerful, the strongest, we talk about strength, is in your vulnerability. You're able to just be honest. Those are the strongest people that I want to model my life after. That you know what, I actually don't know what I'm doing right now. I
Yeah.
actually don't know what's happening right now. I don't even know how I'm feeling right now, but I know that we're going to figure it out and we're going to do it together, but it's going to be done with integrity, and it's going to be done with character, and it's going to be okay if I'm not the one who figures it out.
Yeah.
I can't save. Like, what a narcissistic kind of sociopathic tendency to have, to be like, I can save you and I can save you and I can do this.
It's like the
and
Messiah complex.
Seriously.
Right? And it's like, come on, like
Yeah.
you don't need to carry that.
And I say this now with more embarrassment than shame, but there's been a lot of shame, you know what I mean? Because in that, when you think you can do these things, there's just a path of destruction that comes behind you. And it's like, if you wanted to write a book about the things not to do, you know what I mean? Like, I think I've got that for everyone to kind of take a look at. It's like,
Maybe you need to write that.
yeah. Well,
maybe that's your next project.
totally.
I don't want to add any more to you,
sure,
but
sure.
so Graham, in all that I'm hearing you keep saying recovery and addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to chat about that because, as we talked about, everybody has some form, like what you mentioned, like of addiction. But obviously, this is a big part of your story, and still your story today.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, are you good with talking about that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So how does that come? So let's go back just quick. So you're feeling like a chameleon. You're wanting validation from people. You're multiple. I don't want to say multiple personalities. Multiple kind of like
lives.
Yep. And so let's sort of talk through maybe some key things that happened, and then how did you get into this addiction?
Yeah, I think that the numbing kind of tendency and the addictive personality in there from kind of like day one. So like I'm an all in or all out type of person. So if I'm doing something, I'm 100% into it, and I can't see anything beside me. I can't see anything above me, below me. It's like whatever's right in front of me. Very, very driven human, and like is there saying like a dog with a bone? Like that's kind of been my life. So when I talk a lot about like if I'm living out of addiction or living out of recovery, it's not like am I doing substances or not. It's like what kind of decision making, what kind of thought processes, what am I doing with my emotions, how am I regulating them, and then and so it's like, but when I get super focused and very, very like driven, I know that isn't healthy for me or anyone around me. So, but wanting, at 18 years old, 19 years old, I hit a deer on a motorcycle, and it kind of changed the trajectory of my life in a way that was just like, no one could have ever, projected. And it was like, I was in the hospital for quite a long time. I've had multiple surgeries. The last surgery wasn't even that long ago, to be honest. With compound fractures and all these types of things, and I hit a deer on my motorcycle, and out of that,
Wow.
it changed. Like in these weird, grandiose kind of thoughts, I thought that I was going to potentially do soccer or go to university, do all these things. And in the end, I ended up in the hospital. And so from there, you know, I ended up just really playing lots of music, lots of guitar. You know, I was taking some music history lessons and some, you know, all of the, you know, the things that I could do while I was laid up. And out of that, I ended up playing in a pop rock Christian band, you know, at 19 or 20 at that point, I guess. And I was like cane. I couldn't carry my gear. My whole body was still, I had to sit and play for parts of the first few shows that we did. And it
So
was,
you weren't doing any like BTS dancing or anything?
well, you
Like,
know what?
like, you know,
That was definitely in my head. You know what
but
I mean?
while you're sitting there,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
actually like,
Yeah, I'm doing the moves.
doing the
I got
moves.
this. I got this. And so that's kind of where it started. And I just got this I saw, whoa, I actually have a skill set here that people actually want. And I really enjoy doing it. It kind of hit all the validation buttons, and it's just like, oh, maybe this could happen. So I played with this band called Box Tree for a few years, and in that I actually ended up meeting my now ex-wife, and we were married for almost 9 years, and you know, it was like the same kind of beast that led me down. All of these things led me down, like chasing after this, you know, the dream, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
of like performing and doing music, and you lie to yourself. You think that, like, I lied to myself. I don't want to tell you. I lied to myself thinking that my job doing this and bringing, you know, this to the world was the most important thing. It was like I ended up being a fairly, and these are all words that when I say them out loud, like I cringe a little bit, but I use the cringiness to kind of help with my kind of recovery and all that kind of stuff. But like I felt like I was actually better than other people. And it's like I felt like I became a pretentious, like, you know, whatever
Jerk?
word you want.
Jerk?
Yeah,
Yeah, I got
that
it.
works.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just like, because of what I'm doing, and you know, the stages that I'm playing on and the people that I'm, you know, impacting, that I have more value than other people. And it's like it's no shock that this is like my, whatever you want, kryptonite, or the thing that I battle my whole life. And so I played music, and I did that at a really high level and with some incredible people for a long, long time. But noticing that I was starting to get burnt out because I wasn't doing any sort of self care. You know, I started drinking a little bit more. You know, I started like dabbling into some like non legal drugs, and just like started to self medicate and some of these things. And it got to the place where about 6 years ago, I maybe 7 years ago now, I kind of, like, I was in business with another artist, and we had a studio, or we're working towards having a studio, and we were you know, playing lots, and I did a whole bunch of shows in 1 year, and just like burnt out. And in that burnout, I had started using cocaine as like as just out and about. So we would go on the road for a month, and I'd be back for a month, and in that month, you know, the people that I was hanging around with, the only other people that could hang out during the day and at evening were also, you know what I mean, using, and probably not the healthiest.
Yeah.
And I just found this deep sense of community with this group of people who I felt loved. You know what I mean? And it was like a different version of what I'd felt before, but I felt accepted. I didn't have to be anything for them. They didn't know what or how I did. They didn't see the other life or any of that kind of stuff. They would hear about it, but not experience it. And so in that, I ended up quitting music. I ended up quitting everything, and I got an opportunity to get into a marketing agency and working with some of this. And
Now, are you still married at this time, or
no,
did it end then?
yeah, the marriage ended after, you know, it's just like all the things that you just don't want to say. You know what I mean? It's like I I ended up traveling a lot more. She ended up staying at home a lot more. We stopped making us a focus. you know, she's one of the most beautiful humans that I've ever met. You know, God has totally um, um, given her a new life. She's remarried, has a couple of children. She's extremely, you know, we don't necessarily talk, but seems really extremely happy. And God just, there's a redemption in that story, you know. And I wasn't quite ready for that at that point. And so I kind of went the other way and headed to Nashville, spending time with friends and trying to create this life that I've dreamt of. And from the outsider's perspective, you would think, oh, that guy made it. He's there. And it was just never enough. It was just never enough. It was just never enough. And to the point where I had so many things out there that I wasn't able to keep up. And so I started using drugs more and more. And I ended up with a really heavy cocaine addiction for about 8 to 10 years of that. And that just led into more and more and more and more and more. And you kind of get what you chase after. You know what I mean? It's like there ended up being some really crazy kind of opportunities with lots of people, and around the marketing thing. It's just like the expense accounts and the trips and the whining and the dining. It just fed all into this, like, I'm it. I'm the thing. You know,
I'm what I always wanted to be, right? I wanted to be better than anybody else, and I'm the man.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And yet inside, you know what I mean, just feeling more and more and more, you know, despair. And it would have been it was 2018. A friend's company went public, and we went on in November, we went on like a pretty extreme bender, and in the end, it just all broke down.
You know, I wonder, grab some coffee because it's getting cold. I wonder how many people, and probably lots of people, are doing that right now. You know that? Like, they're living their best life on Insta out there, but then they go home and they cry themselves to sleep in their bed because they're so broken, and this is not who they are, or it's exhausting to keep up, or they're not at peace, or they're afraid they'll be found out that they're a fraud.
Totally.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I bet there's thousands and thousands of people, and people who are listening even to us, where it's like, so I put on this front and make my life look amazing, and yet I'm deeply lonely and deeply broken, and I'm exhausted, and I don't know how long I can do this. So then it makes sense. Then you medicate, and you know, you get addicted to things to make you feel good, to kind of keep this persona up. And that's why I think, Graham, it's so good about this sort of like authentic living. Because the other part too is people are probably freaking out about that, because it's like, well, will people really accept me if they actually know who I really am?
Sure.
Will they like me for this?
Yeah.
And I think what's sad is a lot of people aren't willing to risk being, this is who I am. But also, I think it's legit because people have tried to be honest and say, here I am, and have been rejected.
And rejection's
the worst. It sucks.
Yeah.
Rejection, abandonment. I get that. I mean, through my divorce, I think I didn't know what the word was when he left, and I was trying to figure it out, and it was like grief, and it was rejection and abandonment, which is, I think, some of the biggest fears of humankind, to actually be left or rejected or abandoned because of who you are. And I think that's what I had to really process in therapy for a long time. It's like, am I not good enough? Was I not good enough that somebody would like leave me, like reject me? And because, you know, especially in a marriage, I mean, this is you're the most vulnerable in yourself, you know, behind closed doors, and you feel like you can be yourself because that's the safest place it should be. And that's my own experience, but I get that. So yeah, I think it's just acknowledging for many people, who are listening, to say, we get it, but you can't live that way for long. You'll either crash and burn, or you'll crash and burn. Like, you can't do it, or you end up living a life that's not your own. That's not your real life.
Right. And in that space, like, you know, hearing you talk about from the other side of it, feeling rejected and abandoned, and me on the other side of it, who would have been the person who caused that in Jen, my ex, it's like, it's like, I wish that at the time I could have just said no and be honest, be like, no, I'm rejecting you before you reject me, because I don't want to feel the rejection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in the end, it's like you end up doing the thing that you're scared of the most. And so
Crazy.
it's like I want everybody to love me. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
not even possible.
It's not. It's
It's
like,
not even
come on, there's no.
but I will dance like whatever you need me to do just so that you kind of like me in that moment. And it's like I've come to really understand that is so it's been so unhealthy, and it's led me down these crazy paths. And do I have it all figured out now? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? But am I conscious of it, and have some like weird boundaries where you're like, what do you mean no? And I'm just like, well, no, I got to say no right now because I'm going to be doing it for the wrong reason,
Yeah.
And it's like I've created, these tools and the support system to allow me to be able to say no and not be crippled for weeks afterwards.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so that's like, yeah, it is unique.
So addiction,
Mm-hmm.
your cocaine addiction, was it to keep up with life? Was it the numbing of, of you didn't want to like deal with your true self? Like what was the motivation for you with cocaine?
Yeah, I think it's probably all the above. I think it started out by like, I am like the thing that I think I am when I'm on that drug. So it's like I'm
Okay.
Superman on this drug. I can do anything. And I think I have better ideas. I think I'm more creative. I think I have like more staying power, and I've got longer. I can go longer, wake up earlier, all of the things. And it's like, I don't know who told us the lie that working, you know, tons of hours and only getting like 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night is like really cool, and like it's like it's just not.
No,
You know
it's
what I
not
mean?
cool.
It's like
Actually, sleep is cool, Graham. Sleep is
seriously,
cool.
and maybe it's just because I'm old, but it's like I still don't need a lot of sleep in general,
Yeah.
to be honest. Like I just like, but I would go for like months on end with only a couple hours of sleep a night, and I was pretty good in the morning. And I had this whatever reason, I had a rule that I wouldn't do coke before noon. You know what I
Oh,
mean? It's
good,
like,
good for you.
yeah,
Good
like
for you.
just
Boundaries
it's
and
just like some real boundaries, and it's like you just can convince yourself
yeah.
that you're okay. And then, but mostly it would be like taking clients out in the afternoon, and that's when it would kind of
Okay.
start off, and then it became this thing where it's like it was actually when I was sober, I hated who I was. And
Mm.
so I would just, do some bumps and get it, you know what I mean? Feel 100% like I am it. I'm the thing, and all of this is like, I'm hearing myself say this out loud. And so it is embarrassing that for sure that this was like, that I got to this place, but I'm just being honest, this is what it
Yeah.
was. And it's like, um, and in my recovery, just on a total side note, I don't know why even want to say this, but it's like I I went, I saw a psychiatrist, I saw a therapist, psychologist, like when I went into my rehab program, and I'm begging for them to say, this is why you are like this, or this is why you're like this, or I want to blame something, because there's some trauma in my life as a young kid and some of these things, but it's like I'm looking, why am I making this decision today to do like this? And the reality is that there was some bipolar conversations, some hypomania conversations, some of these things, like, do put him on medication, this and that. And in the end, I ended up just realizing that it's like there's a whole emotional response and a thought pattern that led me to this place. And from there, it's like the only person that I can really blame is myself. And so it's like I had to take responsibility for the train wreck and for harming people emotionally, um, in a way that it's like there's still cringy shame attached to it, but not so much that it's driving my behavior. And so when I say that, I mean, like, at the beginning of my recovery, I worked in some nonprofits and did some things that I just, like, the motivation was driven by shame. I'm trying to rectify my past. And now, I get to, like, I'm doing lots of work, with some nonprofits, including like IJM, which we have partnered with even on this podcast. And just like I have this deep sense of like urgency to help, but it has nothing to do with my past. It's
Wow.
not the shame driving it.
That's freeing.
And I don't even know how I got here. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
it's like, I wish I can tell you that it's the check-ins and it's this and that, but it's like I still feel a lot of shame. And, I message people weekly making amends, you know what I mean? And it's probably at this point more for me, it's probably helping me out more than it's helping
Insane.
them. But it's, in the end, I just feel this strong sense of like what's next, and how to use, my past as a jumping off of what's next, and not having it handcuff me from what I feel like, God's calling us to do.
Yeah. So, wow. Um, so we were talking about addiction, and I think people are gonna be like, but then how did you then go into recovery?
Mm.
Like, was it a trigger point? Was it an event? What made it go now? We went from addiction to now in recovery.
Yeah, so after that, kind of like, it was almost a 4-day kind of like celebratory bender. Um, I got back to my house, and I got into my bedroom, and I just fell to my knees, and I just cried and cried and cried, and I was just like, I am so over this empty feeling. And I don't there's some other things that were surrounding that, that helped cause that pressure and that pain, but I just was like, I'm done. And so I detoxed myself, which is super dangerous, by the way, to if you are thinking about getting sober and clean, not to detox by yourself without the help of a doctor, and or we can put some stuff in the show notes to help potentially, just so
Yeah, that'd be
people can
great.
have some help.
Mm-hmm.
But I spent Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday I went into AHS, like an outpatient program, and just kind of started the process. And I
But wait, you literally had a big bender,
yeah,
and you came home and were just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it
cried
really
out.
was that.
It literally was like, I just cried out. I literally cried out to God and said, I need you. I need you. Like, I need you. I can't do this on my own anymore. And just the amount there, I can't even tell you how stripped and how broken and how just like I felt absolutely useless. And I felt like just so like the despair is like, there's not even a word to help describe how I felt. And part of that is all the chemicals, and part of that's all the thing, but there was just a very, spiritual and emotional reaction to like, this was it. And I don't know how I knew. And I said, I didn't even know where to go. I still thought that I could kind of like control, like some of the outcomes of some of these things. But, I was at the agency. I went into the CEO and I just said, hey man, I'm done. I messaged him. I didn't see him. And there's another partner there that I talked to first, and we took about a week before we kind of figured out what that looked like. But I got rid of all my stuff within the next couple
To
weeks.
get rid of all your friends?
Unfortunately, that just wasn't even an option, in the sense of like, I didn't even know what or where to go, so it was very lonely, but it was like the right thing. And it was just before Christmas. So I just had this thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to quit all the work. I'm going to just put everything on pause. I'm going to go home for Christmas, and I'm not going to tell anybody. And then when everybody leaves, I'm going to come clean to my parents. And that was like, I don't even know what it'd be curious to hear from, some of the outside family members what I looked like. Like, I've seen pictures even back then, and I was very gray. I weigh almost 40 pounds more than what I weighed then, and I'm still fairly skinny. It's like I was like a shell of a human. And when I had this conversation with my parents, and I just was honest with them, and said, "Hey, listen." And I wanted to just say, I just wanted to say that I had a substance abuse problem, because they would just assume that it was alcohol, because it's like ran in the family and there's some things, but alcohol is like, that's not where, that doesn't get me up in the morning. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was this idea of like feeling, bigger than life. And I had this conversation, and my mom, who had an alcoholic father, and her brothers, struggled with it. My dad, I could see the triggers just happening in her eyes, but she was able to just put it all back. And, the disappointment was probably me projecting on them a little bit, but there was fear in their eyes. And then there was just this like acceptance, like there wasn't even an option. You're getting rid of all your stuff and you're moving in with us. And I fought that at first, because like 40-year-old dude moving in with her parents. And now it's like I still live there 2.5 years later.
Listen, I would live with my parents. Yeah. It's a sweet deal. My mom's a good cook.
Seriously.
My dad, like everything's taken care
of. How did I gain that 40 pounds? Patricia Jane's cooking.
Nice. Yeah, totally. There you go, mama. Yeah. Okay.
And so it's like it's that unique kind of space, and I fought it, and I said, well, this is what I'll do. I'll do the outpatient here, and then I'll keep a place in Calgary, and kind of my parents live in Sherwood Park, and then all that happened, but just the love, and I just cried and cried and cried. And then I did my recovery, and I sat on a couch for months. Like I was so, like the process was, I tell this to everyone I know, actually, so I might as well tell you, is that I feel and sense and know when somebody's ready for recovery, and we're ready to give it up, because they're willing to do anything, whether it means cut up the credit cards, whether it means give the bank account to their accountability, whether it means there's the pride is gone. You have to release everything and give that up. And there's like for me, obviously there's a massive faith journey to this as well, but there's a very, very, very practical journey that this wasn't something that I was able to just pray away. And I wish I could have, you know what I mean? But no, there's some deep, deep work that I do daily to continue on my journey. And the substance abuse thing isn't as like, listen, anyone is capable of anything, and who knows what's going to happen. But I feel really confident that I have all the checks and bounds in place, that there won't be a substance relapse. You know what I mean? If I relapse, and I do regularly around character, and less character, but more behavioral, whereas it's like I'm living out of it, my addiction versus out of recovery, which we talked about.
Yeah.
But that process has been, I couldn't have done it without my parents. It was like, I am so grateful, and it doesn't go kind of unnoticed that not everybody has that type of a support system. So I thank God, and I thank my parents, and it's just, it's been an insane journey that has led me, here today.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful for it, yet it is freaking painful, some of it.
Totally. Graham, I said this to you when we first started, that I'm so glad you're here. And it wasn't here in the studio, but that you're actually alive in here. And I think that's just the beautiful story of God. Like, I'm listening, and there's so much about redemption, and so much about healing, and so much about second chances. And I think that's the story of like us, but also God's story within our story. Like he's like, yeah, like I'm here, and you have free will, and you can go make your decisions. But no, those decisions that come out of yourself and motivated by yourself are going to harm you and hurt you. And I'm so thankful that, after the big bender, you still felt close enough and good enough to go to God. And I say that because so many people that live in shame and make decisions, not only to people, to be honest, but they have serious blocks with coming to God. And I think your story shares it. And actually, God's the one who actually will fully embrace you and take you with no judgment. And I want people to know that, because people have, so many people aren't about Jesus because they've seen too many judgmental people or too many blocks. But I want to say it today, and I think your story is beautifully said, that actually if anybody God is the one, Jesus is the one who will fully embrace you as you are. So, if you're listening and you're afraid, I think you're a great example that it's like, no, actually, you can just go and say, wow, it's been a long time. I've been doing my own thing, but God, I really need you. And then, second to that, and again, it is, in my context and yours, like I had great parents who stuck with me in all the crap I did. And so, there's two things. I think I understand there's a lot of listeners who don't have great parents. And so I think that's even more important to find mentors, to find your people, church, find those people, older generation to help you. But I think also shout out to parents. Graham, when I go and speak to women's conferences, I'm always looking at women who are moms. And when I talk to, go to conferences and I'm with men, I'm like, you got to be a good dad and a good parent because your decisions, how you love or not love, will impact your kids and generations to generations to come. Like it's all of us. I know we're broken and I know it's hard, but trying to live in a space of authenticity and unconditional love changes everything. You know what I mean? Like it's like, and so I'm thankful for your parents. And I think I always get emotional because I have a special connection with my dad, and I'll get emotional just talking about how dads, in their decision to love and care, can change a kid's life. Because my dad's forgiveness completely changed mine, And my mom's cooking. My mom makes amazing pierogies, perohe, and borscht. And so it's so awesome that your mom like fattened you up and got you there. But I just think that's really awesome that those parts were really key in like your recovery and where you are today. So shout out to God, shout out to parents. So I think that's amazing. And in that I want to talk about the 4 points that you said, because I think that's really important for your story. And maybe we can just talk about what that means. Because I think people are like, okay, so I'm hearing Graham's story. I could be in recovery. I could be in addiction. I could be living my like false self. I'm still stuck on external validation, right? All these things. So then let's talk through, Graham. You talked about living this life of radical honesty. So what does that mean? Because I think people, so we'll start with that one because I want to go through the 4 because I think it's important. So what does that mean to live in radical honesty?
I think it's as much about being honest with myself as it is about being honest with others. It's like in addiction, you end up, everything that you do, you're trying to strategize to find a way to do the thing that you're thinking about to do. So all of the other things are just like a way to get there. And so in that radical honesty, it's funny, we have a mutual friend, Matt Grieve, who it would have been a month after I came clean to my parents. Him and I connected at a conference that I was in Edmonton, and he was emceeing something, and we ended up afterwards hanging out, and I was just really honest with him. And from that day since, we've either talked or text messaged back and forth a little bit, and me being honest with him and being able to be and to see that there was his response isn't judgment. His response wasn't to like condemn. His response was to be like, hey, let's journey this and figure this out. And so it allowed me to even be, I knew that it was the only way that I could survive is by being honest. But I was really honest with a couple key people who responded in like love, grace, and mercy versus like the condemnation. You need to do this better. You need to do that better. And out of that, it just proves that it's like, okay, I'm going to just live a very radically honest life. I'm going to do this, this, and this. I'm going to be honest with myself. I feel this way right now, but that isn't what reality is. I will do these things because I know they're the right things to do. But in that radical honesty, I feel like there's accountability. And so it's I can't live in any sort of shade. I can't live in the shadows. It literally is like, this is where I am and this is who I am. And in that, if you don't love that, then there's nothing, doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong or vice versa. It legitimately just means that we're probably not here doing life together. Yeah. And so you find the people who will hear you you'll talk your boundaries, you tell the things that you need to be the best version of yourself, and then they support you versus condemning you. And so that's been like a big check-in for me. If I'm not fully able to be like really honest with Trevor and with Matt and, you know, a couple other people in my life, I legitimately know that there's something wrong. And so it's like just another little red flag, and it's usually nothing major. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, why didn't you tell me you text, you know, let's say for me, I'm single. So it's like, if there's like, you know, a relationship that is maybe, you know, happening, why didn't you message that? Why did I message that person and not feel I could talk to somebody else about it? You know, I'm just, I'm grasping at, you know, things right now. But that to being said, it's like that radical honesty allows me to be honest with myself, honest with God, honest with people. And those three things are what's going to keep me clean.
Awesome. And for some people, like, oh my goodness, they're terrified of it. But then that's actually like real living. Like, if you think about it, how many people are not actually really living their life? Like, I know that sounds crazy, but like, people are walking around living somebody else's life, living a fake life.
Yeah.
They're actually not living their life.
Yeah.
And that's it's like, I can imagine people are like, okay, that's terrifying because, again, like we talked about, people might not like me. But here's the thing. People don't like you.
Yeah.
Like, I think people have to realize, like,
seriously,
there are people that don't like you.
Yeah.
So, like, here's a big message for all of you out there who are trying to get everyone to like you. They don't.
Or even understand you.
Understand you, exactly. So, like, release that and get on with your life.
Yeah.
And just live your authentic life. Oh, my goodness, I love that. Okay. I think in that you then said there's authentic living, which I think it ties in, but authentic living means...
For me, it is very specific about the motivation in which I'm doing things, right? So it's like, if my motivation is to actually have you, you know, affirm what I'm doing, then that is inauthentic living, it, you know, for myself. And so these can be, you know, you can use words and, you know, things for yourself. But for me, it's like when I'm living out of like this is, I want to do this because this is at my core what I feel like I need to be doing. It's what God's, you know, kind of imparted in me, or as a group of people, we've come together and said, this is what God's saying for us to do. I'm living in that authenticity of like, but it's it's all about the motivation. So externally, it could look the exact same, and I wouldn't be living authentically.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, it stems from, you know, way back church, living multiple lives, needing that. Like, I think the authentic living, you know, when I decided to do that myself, because I don't know if it's like growing up in church, being a missionary kid, all the expectation of how I'm supposed to be. I mean, and then I went the extreme and just was exactly opposite. So people were like, look at her red lipstick, her big earrings, her big crimped hair, her, you know, her bodysuits and jeans. Like, I went kind of like this antithesis of Christianity just to kind of like buck at it. Because you know, I'm pretty creative and I'm pretty out there and love to dance and party in that way. And church always seems so staid and boring. So I did the other thing. But that wasn't authentic either. Like, I wasn't actually, that wasn't authentic because it's more me trying to be like, you know, stick it to the man, you know?
Yeah.
But then the whole journey for me of trying to find, and as a woman, wow, just so much of the validation, affirmation from men and women, and figuring, what does that mean to be actually Melinda? So, you know, can I still laugh really loudly? Because in corporate settings, somebody told me once I laughed too loud. And what do we do with you? Because you're wearing fur and leather pants in a corporate office to go to work. And I'm like, well, I actually really love this, you know? And yet, what was my motivation for that? But also embracing, like, this is who I am. Like, so God created me to be. Here's my passions. I'm a woman. I'm a speaker. And so if churches didn't want me to speak because I was a woman, well, then I'm not gonna bother with that. I'm gonna go to the places that accept me. So yeah, it's been a journey. It still is, right? This whole sense of authentic living. I like that. All right, your third one was, and I think it ties in, vulnerable transparency, which I think is part of this honesty. But I think those words, I think, are terrifying to people. Vulnerability and transparency.
Yeah, and true vulnerability is not cool, you know, and like it's not, and like full transparency is not cool. It's like it's the opposite. Well, it doesn't have to be the opposite. It literally is just like what I needed to do for me to get clean and sober and down the right path was like really, really, really vulnerable and like honest about not being able to be the thing that whatever I thought you thought I was. And some of that, it's like I go into, and it's funny, even as we're talking about these things, I'm realizing that a lot of this has to do with doing and works and this and that, and because that it's I'm in the midst of this. I haven't figured it out. It's just the thing is that it's like I get so much validation out of the things that I can do versus the things that I can be. And so
That's powerful.
it's like, what kind of person do I want to be? Well, I want to be integral. I want to be kind. I want to have humility. Those are the things that I want to be, but I still tend to naturally go to the things that I can actually do. And so in this space, it's like, that's just another checklist of like, the transparency. Where am I living? Am I living out of my dues, or am I living out of like who I am? And that is like a really, really, me on autopilot without, kind of be my awareness of how I'm being is not good for anyone. You know what I mean? I will go into a mode because the neuroplasticity is still wired a certain way, and there's still we're talking years, 20 years of a certain way, even longer of us. And so me being conscious of it, just these check-ins every day, multiple times a day, allows me to just kind of keep at least in the right direction.
I have to kind of insert, well done. I just want to affirm to you, it's hard work. And so many times you could have been like, I'm not going to be honest, it's too much work. So I just want to affirm to you, great job. And I love the last one where we talked about open-handedness. I love that. I'm a visual person. So, and we were laughing before about holding on, especially for girls with acrylics or biogel, which I have on today. And you clench so much and you think you control everything. And actually your nails start hurting you because they're digging in and you can bleed. So it's like, girl, open your hand and feel the freedom in which to live. Let's talk about that, because I know people say it, but what does it really mean to be open-handed? Living, decisions, relationships, what does that look like? And why do we live, many of us, close-handed, fisted?
It's a control thing.
Yeah,
probably,
for sure.
You know what I mean? And a perfection thing. And for me, it is anyways. And it's like this idea of, I can see, let's say, for instance, I want this situation to end up like this. And it's like, so I'll know what I want on the back end of it. And so what do I need to do to get that there? Versus now, it's just like, I'm pretty open about what the outcome actually ends up being, because I can't control you, even though I will try. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was my go-to, is if I can negotiate this, and this, and this, and get you to see this perspective, and you see that perspective, then I can get the thing that I want at the end. And a lot of times the means did not justify the end, or in my mind, it didn't matter what the means were as long as the end happened. And so that's where all the destruction comes from, right? So this is the biggest thing for me in everything, in living in peace. The world is in chaos.
Yeah.
But there's a way I've personally found, and I'm not always good at it, but it's like I've touched it enough to know that I want to live in it, is that there can be peace in the midst of chaos. Your world can be crashing around you, but you can know that the outcome, that God really does care about that, and really does care about you. And you might have a version of the outcome that actually isn't what's best for you. So I'll open-handedly, and me, I'm going at a lot of things. We're going at a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality is that I hold it all really open-handed. If tomorrow somebody came to me and said, hey, this project isn't going to go forward because of this, I wouldn't kind of get in there and try and figure it out and break doors open. On the contrary, God and I have a deal, legitimately.
Nice.
That it's like, some people talk about, you just got to work hard and break through that door and break through this. Him and I have this deal where I don't do that at all. It's like, because in my own kind of ability, I've broken down some doors that just should have never been opened. And that just the pain that comes out of it is just so catastrophic that him and I now talk about, okay, if these doors open, I will walk through them. If they're shut, I will do a tiny little knock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll be gentle about it. I might even try the doorknob. You know what I mean? But if it's locked and I don't have a key, I'm not breaking it down. And I'll wait for God to open up that door if it's ever supposed to be
That's
open.
cool.
And
Good visual.
so when I say open-handed, that's how I need to live, or I'll live out of my addiction, not my recovery.
I love that you have a deal with God. I actually, I people laugh. I always, when I talk to God, I'm always like, "How are you doing?" So I went to one of my pastor friends, Bruxy Cavey, who's a mentor and for many years from the Meeting House, and I said, "Okay, theologically, is it cool that I ask God how He's doing? Like how He's running the world?" He's like, "You can do whatever you want." Like it is kind of weird because He's God, but I'm like, that's the kind of like personal relationship that I have. In that, Graham, for those who are tired of the church, feel that God wasn't there through some really horrible things, um, blame God, whatever, what would you say to them? Because God and your relationship with Him has been through a very, very dynamic, if I can say, relationship. You know, you're with Him, you're not with Him, you leave Him, you're away, you're with. You know what I mean? It is a relationship of through the years. But what would you say for those that are like, I don't know, like should I kind of go back in and see what he's about, or what would you say? Like why for you,
Yeah.
but also for those people who are like, yeah, I'm exhausted by the church for being living multiple lives and the expectation and judgment on me, and then I also didn't feel God was with me in some of like the most difficult times. What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I'm the right person to have the authority on this.
You don't have to be,
but
you're the right person right now.
I can tell you my perspective is that doesn't matter what community or what people group you're in, there's like all sorts of dynamics. And so my personal experience is I don't blame God for how somebody's treating me. It's really difficult when somebody has a platform and there's expectations and they let you down, whether it's your family members, whether it's a business partner, whether it's like
Your pastor.
It's like people are going to let you down. That is legitimately life. And so I don't even know where this came from, but I've just never, when somebody's let me down, I've never blamed God for that. And so that's been my own personal journey, and I can't give you an answer why. You know what I mean? I have family members who blame God. We went through the same thing, and their God is just not a part of their lives anymore. And yet for me, there's just this thing that I've always known that God is there. And so, but I don't believe that He's trying to cause me harm. I think He just cares so much that sometimes bad things are going to happen, and I've gone through all sorts of it, but mostly because I've caused it myself, and so it's like when somebody is the victim of it, that I really don't have an answer for. My heart goes out, but in the end, you are responsible for how you react, and you're responsible for your actions. And if you're using anything, and this is maybe as hard of a conversation as I would ever have, or a statement potentially, anything you're using to qualify or use it as an excuse for poor behavior, it's not that person's fault anymore. Now you can only control you. And so those are the things that you need to just really, whether it's forgiveness or whatever that looks like. And I don't know the pathway for you or whoever to get there. I just know that if you're reacting out of what somebody else has done to you, it's like you probably have the right to do that potentially in whatever scenario. You have the right to be upset. You have the right, but is that going to bring you freedom? Is that going to bring you an opportunity to come to grips with some of the things that you probably need to work on yourself? And I feel like, excuses for me, and like this, I don't even know how I'm coming across here, because I'm the most compassionate, non-judgmental human in the world, because I've been given so much grace in my journey. I just know that for me, as soon as I stopped using some of these things as excuses for why I got to where I was the moment that I was able to get free.
Wow. Bam. That's it. Too many of it. Wow. It's so good. Too many of us blame so many other things. And I think some of the most powerful stories I've heard are people who have gone through horrendous things and yet forgave and didn't remain the victim and spoke up and then started doing incredible things about standing up against injustice. Like it's an amazing thing. You literally have two people go through the same things and totally two different outcomes based on their response and based on their decision to go forward or not. And too many people are not going forward. Too many people are stuck in, but they deserve my anger. They deserve my punishment. They deserve it. They deserve it. And at the end, we know this. It's like when you don't forgive, it's like you're actually like keeping yourself imprisoned from freedom. You're really amazing. This is we've talked over Zoom the last little while, but I never really sort of heard your story. And now I'm your biggest fan. Okay, you might have a lot of other fans, but I'm just saying I really appreciate your honesty and authenticity and vulnerability and sharing. It's not easy, especially sort of exposing your life and decisions and things to
and I
the
might
world.
not have been super articulate throughout this whole thing, the storyline all over the place.
No, but you know what?
Yeah.
It was perfect. It was perfect. In that, I'm so excited again that we're partnering. I think that's what I love. Like, it's not just like business partnership, but it's like friendship. And to hear you now, Graham, share more, it makes me more say, awesome. Like, this is the kind of people that I want to partner with and connect with, because I want to be with people that are authentic and honest and open. I'm exhausted with people who are fronting and aren't their true self. So this is amazing. And in that, I know that Momentum has some really exciting things coming up, right? Like, I don't know, you can talk about it, more partnerships or more things happening.
Yeah, and we can there'll be lots of opportunities to kind of get into it. I'm hoping, like in the fall, I'm really excited about creating a couple more series with you and seeing if we can kind of do some other kind of, joint partnerships, this has been just a blast for us. And it's been really cool to hear other people's stories, you know what I mean? And what kind of like makes them kind of tick and what brought them here. But yeah, we've, as Momentum, the one thing I will have to say that is like really key and core to my heart is the idea of protecting people who can't protect themselves. You know what I mean? Like the vulnerable and the work that International Justice Mission is doing and our ability to kind of come alongside them as an organization. And so Momentum has partnered with them in a whole bunch of different ways to try and tell their story and to try and obviously it's expensive. They use the legal system, you know what I mean, to petition governments to try and change laws to help protect these kids and men and women. And so that's been a huge, like a very significant part of my last little journey that I can happily say has nothing to do with shame work. It has to do with the work,
Nice.
and feel the core of. And we've got a new book coming out that actually launches at the end of this week with one of our friends. His name's Daniel Kuhlman, and he wrote this book called Breath of Life, and it's the 3 breaths of God, and he unpacks that. And then we have a docuseries coming out at the end of September or end of October that's going to actually do a full theatrical release in North America, which is really exciting. And so that's cool. It's very interesting. I hope to get Daniel on your program, and he can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And we've got Trevor in this whole state. Him as the musician he is, and he's hanging out with his kids a lot in this kind of like downtime pandemic, and started writing these songs for what we're now getting animated. So Momentum Kids, and we're doing a Magistation, and it's like it's like a bunch of kids in stir crazy in the house, and we wrote this whole we're writing right now this whole kind of series around that, which is we're pretty pumped about. So there's lots and lots of like multiple podcasts, partnerships, including yours, that I just feel like creating impact and creating an opportunity to help encourage people and tell people's stories so that they can know that it is okay, you're okay, it's going to be okay. That idea of that here's other people that you're not alone in this. Yeah. And it's like, how do we do that properly? Well, it just is by, having incredible humans like yourself come alongside and say, hey, I have a story that really is similar to yours, and I think people need to hear what the next steps are. And that's why Momentum exists at this point.
Amazing. And I love the name of momentum because and that's my kind of like language where it's like momentum and
Mm-hmm.
movement and going
Mm-hmm.
forward. So, Graham, thank you so much. As I think about, just to recap all that you shared, I love this radical honesty and authentic living, vulnerable transparency and open handed. I just love those. Those are for everybody, things that they can live by. I think, too, some thoughts about that. Your motivation matters. Where does that, why are you doing what you're
Mm.
doing? A check in on, are you pursuing external accolades and validation, or do you understand that you are valuable and loved by God just as you are?
Mm.
I think parents, we did a shout out, but I think if you're a parent, maybe there's a time to check to say, am I loving my kid unconditionally? And how will I respond when something of a crisis comes up? Is it going to be, of love and care, or is it going to be judgment? I think hearing about you in the most broken state, still going to God and not being afraid that
Mm.
He won't listen was really key. And it's a reminder to people who think that you're too far away from God. You never are. Because here's the truth. He's always been with you.
There.
He
Yeah.
never left.
Yeah.
Um, I think what was really classy was just, even going through a divorce, you affirming and being honest about the relationship, but affirming her. And it's neat that in your story, her story was redeemed as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for those who've gone through divorce, that's a reminder too. If you're going through it or have gone through it, that, there's redemption in that space. And then I think 5-year-old you
Mm.
being a little disturber, but I just think it's neat that even at a young age, you can make the decision for God. You can still, you know, God will kind of like pursue you at any age and that decision. And so there's just so much. I mean, I think for days, Graham, I'll be kind of like processing all the things that you've said, and this was really enriching and life giving to have you here and to hear your story. And thank you for trusting me to like hear your story and talk about it. And I know it's hard and it's vulnerable and it's out there, but know that so many people are going to be encouraged by it and strengthened. And we're hoping that they'll find freedom in areas like of addiction and of self motivation and all that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope it was okay.
Yeah.
Are you exhausted?
I'm pretty sure we'll be processing this for a few more days after this. Yeah.
But you did a really great job. So thanks so
thanks.
much for being here on See Hear Love, and it's super excited for more partnership and maybe getting you back again for the story. And I think we're going to also be chatting with Trevor too about his story.
Absolutely.
So way to go, Graham. Way to go, Momentum. And thanks for being with me.
Thank you.